Have y'all ever experienced something like where everything is going real good in your life, but then like one catastrophe just ruins it all and sets you back to zero? That's what it was like for the Black Panthers in 1968 and 1969. They were growing in membership at an exponential rate. They're on every news channel and in every newspaper in the country, and they're gaining the support from groups and even governments all around the world. And yet, they are continuously having to deal with catastrophic events. One step forward, two steps back. Without the rock-solid leadership of Huey P. Newton and the electrifying and motivating roar of Eldridge Cleaver, the Black Panthers were easy pickings for the FBI. COINTELPRO, for those who may not know, was an FBI program explicitly designed to dismantle any and all far-left movements in America during the 60s and 70s. Black power, anti-war, civil rights, women's lib, etc. The FBI would often accomplish this by sending informants to infiltrate these groups, illegally spying on targets, illegal arrest, spreading misinformation about these groups, the whole shebang. And believe you me, the FBI will go all out when it came to tearing apart the Black Panthers. In August of 1967, just 2 months before Huey would get locked up, COINTELPRO was instructed to focus its attention on, quote, neutralizing black nationalist hate groups, end quote. Now you may be thinking that all hate groups should be neutralized, and I agree, except the Panthers weren't a hate group. They frequently allied with white leftist organizations like the Peace and Freedom Party during the Free Huey campaign, and certain factions of the Panthers would go on to ally with the Weather Underground, as we'll touch on in a moment. This was not about the Panthers being a hate group. Their enemy was never all the white folks. Their enemy was the racist white power structure that was subjugating them.
Back here in the last Sunday's paper that we were anti-white, that we hold no bones, this is a quote, pick no bones about being anti-white. This is a bold-faced lie. We don't hate nobody because of their color. We hate oppression. We hate murder of black people in our communities. We hate the gross unemployment that exists in our communities. We hate black men being taken off into the military service to be fighting for our racist, decadent American promise us freedom.
You could say whatever you want to say about pro-black movements of the modern day, but you absolutely cannot deny that black people were being extremely mistreated by a racist white power structure during the 1960s and 70s. You are not a hate group for fighting against a group of people that are actively harming you and your people. But do you think any of these facts stop the FBI from painting the Black Panther Party as an evil, hate-filled, racist organization? Of course not. In September of 1968, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was calling the Black Panthers, quote, the greatest threat to the internal security of the country, end quote. The FBI would also utilize the media to assist in depicting the Panthers as some great villain because winning hearts and minds is one of the most important objectives in any war. If you can get the American public to turn against the Panthers, then it makes destroying them that much easier. But the FBI didn't stop with the media campaign because they were absolutely boots on the ground as well. One of the most famous examples of the FBI directly sabotaging the Panthers would be the situation with the Chicago chapter of the Black Panthers. The FBI wrote antagonizing anonymous letters to both the Panthers and a local gang known as the Blackstone Rangers, and the FBI made it look like the letters were coming from the opposite organization. This was done in order to break up the alliance the Panthers and the Rangers had with one another, and it absolutely worked. The FBI also planted informant William O'Neill within the Chicago Black Panthers, and his task was to provide the FBI with information on the organization. It's also been seriously alleged that O'Neill had drugged Black Panther leader Fred Hampton the night his apartment was raided and he was shot unalive by police. While everyone knows about what the FBI was doing to the Chicago Black Panthers, many people don't know that they were doing this same thing in other parts of the country as well. The FBI used the exact same tactic of sending anonymous letters during their campaign against the Los Angeles Black Panthers. This is ultimately what led to the death of Black Panther Bunchy Carter. Bunchy was shot and unalived by members of a black nationalist group known as US Organization. The Panthers and US Organization had been beefing with each other over perceived insults. It was later revealed during the church committee, which I speak on in my MK Ultra video, that the FBI was behind the entire thing. They had instigated the beef in order to sow division between the two groups. The story of Bunchy Carter is an interesting one, and I actually did a brief short about it. So the short's on my page, go check it out if you're interested. J. Edgar Hoover wanted to destroy the Panthers so bad that he didn't care if he had to make shit up to do so. The FBI special agent in charge in San Francisco wrote to Hoover and informed him that their investigation only found that the Panthers were primarily just feeding black children in their communities, not doing anything violent or dangerous. Hoover wrote back and stated that the agent's career depended on him finding evidence that proved the Panthers were, quote, a violence-prone organization seeking to overthrow the government by revolutionary means, end quote. On top of having the FBI secretly destroying their organization from the inside out, the Panthers were also experiencing financial issues. At this time, the Panthers are operating the free breakfast for children program, free health clinics, political education classes, and other programs they refer to as survival programs. With their growth in popularity and membership, these programs aren't just servicing a few hundred people in Oakland anymore. Now it's nationwide, and the Panthers need money to keep these things going. Except the leadership is weak at the time, and weak leadership is no good for inspiring the people to donate to the cause. They didn't have Huey in the streets, they don't have Eldridge at the podium, they have David Hilliard and his brother June, who are not very popular with many Black Panthers to say the least, but we'll get to that in a second. Not to mention, Black Panthers are getting locked up left and right, and court cases ain't cheap, especially when you have 21 members all getting locked up at the exact same time for very serious crimes. On April 2nd of 1969, 21 members of the New York Black Panthers were arrested by the NYPD and hit with over 200 counts of criminal conspiracy. They were accused of planning to murder police officers and bomb public buildings. As many of you know, one of these 21 Black Panthers was a 22-year-old pregnant woman named Alice Williams. Alice would go on to change her name to Afeni Shakur, and the baby she was carrying while she was fighting for her literal freedom will go on to become rap superstar Tupac Shakur. This case is probably the single most important linchpin when it comes to the eventual split within the Black Panther Party. If the Black Panthers knew any better, they would have packed it up right then and there and called it quits. But even though things were looking bad, there was a small glimmer of hope that people were looking towards. Huey P. Newton had some juice on his case, and it was starting to look like he was about to come home and set the Black Panthers back on the right track. Huey had been found guilty of voluntary manslaughter on September 8, 1968. He was found not guilty of felonious assault, and that kidnapping charge had been dismissed. He was sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. Huey's initial trial is kind of wild, and I suggest you all check it out, but for the sake of keeping this video at a somewhat reasonable length, I'll spare you all the details. However, Huey appealed this conviction and won that appeal due to a legal loophole. The judge that had presided over his initial trial had technically given improper or incomplete instructions to the jury. Judge Friedman never gave the jury the option to convict Huey on involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter should have been an available charge due to Huey's claim that he had been disoriented after he was shot by Officer Frey. This resulted in the California Court of Appeals reversing his voluntary manslaughter conviction on May 29, 1970, which made Huey eligible for a bond. On August 5, 1970, Huey P. Newton walked out of the Alameda County Courthouse a free man. He had been able to secure a $50,000 bond. He was met by a crowd of supporters who cheered and embraced Huey with optimistic enthusiasm. The Black Revolutionary Messiah was free once again, ready to lead his people to the promised land. All seemed right with the world. Except no, the fuck it was not. The Panthers were genuinely glad that Huey had made it up out the belly of the beast, but they also expected him to solve all the problems that had been plaguing them during the 2 years Huey was gone. And there were a whole lot of problems to address. Real quick, I need to give some background information on the structure of the Black Panther Party. The Panthers had chapters all over the country by 1970, but the Panthers were still an Oakland-based organization. Oakland is where this whole movement originated, so the leadership for the overall Black Panther organization was based in Oakland. The boys out in Oakland had the final say for any and all matters related to the Panthers at this time. While Huey was gone, David Hilliard was the official leader of the Black Panthers, but for the soldiers on the block and the general public, Eldridge Cleaver was the man they looked at as leading the Panthers in Huey's absence. This caused a plethora of issues, and Huey would literally inherit this beef. David Hilliard was a very sharp and organized man. He was great with the day-to-day task of running an organization, but he wasn't a boots-on-the-ground sort of guy. Eldridge Cleaver was the exact opposite. He was definitely willing to jump in the streets and put in work, but he absolutely neglected the mundane yet crucial tasks necessary in keeping an organization afloat. Naturally, David and Eldridge did not see eye to eye. Eldridge felt that David was overly bureaucratic, and Eldridge felt that bureaucracy was not what the revolution was about. Eldridge was also very upset with the way David was handling the New York 21 case, as were the members of the New York 21. Eldridge and the New York Panthers watched all of the time, effort, and resources that the Oakland leadership had eagerly poured into the Free Huey movement. But when it came time to support the New York 21 during their fight for liberation, crickets. Nowhere near the same level of support. According to Eldridge and members of the New York Panthers, the New York 21 were writing letter after letter to Oakland in order to coordinate support for their case. Allegedly, David Hilliard and his brother June completely ignored almost all of these letters. But I can't act like Huey came into this situation impartial and innocent. He absolutely picked a side, and he absolutely created more drama and division himself. When Huey got out of jail, he expected all power to be returned to him. He thought the entire party would look solely to him for guidance, but that's not at all what happened. When Huey got locked up, the Panthers were just a small homegrown Oakland group, but now it was a full-blown international organization. A lot of the guys Huey was running with before he went to jail were now in jail themselves, or deceased. Even his original co-founder Bobby Seale was locked up in Connecticut at this time, so Huey didn't know almost any of these Panthers now, and these new Panthers didn't know Huey. Huey was always the brains of the whole revolution, but he was never a talented public speaker, at least not like Eldridge Cleaver. And Huey didn't have that trained-to-go clout like Deputy Minister of Defense Geronimo Pratt. Like I mentioned earlier, Geronimo was an actual trained killer. He was special ops in Vietnam. So these new Panthers are looking at Eldridge and Geronimo as the true heart and soul of the revolution. The power dynamics had changed so much that when Huey started teaching political education classes, Panthers would just get up and walk right out. This dealt a massive blow to Huey's ego. It was around this time that Huey started floating the idea of changing his title to Supreme Commander, which he ultimately would end up doing. He wanted there to be no mistake who the real head nigga in charge was. The fact that Geronimo was so well respected would cause Huey to grow envious, and so he was looking for an opportunity to get Geronimo out the way. That opportunity would come sooner rather than later. On December 9th, 1969, Geronimo and his fellow Panthers were involved in a shootout with the LAPD. But not just the regular LAPD. Nah, they went up against a newly formed division known as the Special Weapons and Tactics Unit, aka SWAT. This was the first real test that SWAT would face in the line of duty, and Geronimo Pratt was right in the middle of the action.
The intermittent warfare between the Black Panthers and police erupted today in Los Angeles. There, a group of them, 3 women and 8 men, barricaded themselves in their headquarters and fought police with automatic weapons and hand grenades for 5 hours before surrendering. 3 policemen were wounded. The fight in Los Angeles came only 4 days after the shootout in Chicago, in which 2 Black Panthers were killed by police.
Around 5 in the morning, SWAT had kicked in the door of the LA Black Panthers headquarters. It was a raid. The Panthers ain't wait to see who it was coming through that door. They immediately began exchanging gunfire with the SWAT team. Keep in mind, Fred Hampton had just been unalived by the Chicago Police Department during a raid only a few days ago. And now the LA Panthers are being raided themselves. Panthers all over the country knew what type of time the police were on. As they say, you can be judged by 12 or carried by 6. This incident in Los Angeles will become one of the biggest shootouts in American history, and more than 350 police officers were involved. And yet, nobody died, surprisingly. After a 5-hour standoff with SWAT, the Panthers finally surrendered, and Geronimo Pratt and the rest of the Panthers were charged with assaulting police officers and conspiracy to commit murder. Geronimo would bond out on this case, but he would be arrested again 1 year later in December of 1970 in relation to the SWAT shootout and an older 1968 murder. His lawyer on this case was none other than Johnny Cochran. I told y'all he would show up in this story again. But it was after Geronimo got arrested that Huey P. Newton and David Hilliard decided to label Geronimo a traitor and expel him from the Black Panther Party. Geronimo had been on the run from the law, so he had to go what they call underground. This means he couldn't easily make any money, so he had to rely on funds from the Black Panther Party. Huey claimed these financial requests were one of the reasons that made him expel Geronimo from the party. But secretly, everyone knew it was because Huey didn't like the amount of shine Geronimo was getting within the organization. Huey felt like Geronimo was a threat to his authority. It would later be revealed that the FBI instigated Huey's distrust for Geronimo by fabricating letters that made it seem as if Geronimo was planning to assassinate Huey. The Oakland Central Committee's decision to turn their back on Geronimo will cause the split within the Panthers to deepen. It's around this time that Huey is also making odd personal choices that's causing party members to look at him sideways. For example, Huey decided he needed to move into a $650 a month penthouse in Oakland. That's the equivalent to about $5,000 in 2026 money. This is an example of what a $5,000 a month penthouse in Oakland will look like today. Huey is supposed to be a revolutionary leader, someone who's focused on the bigger picture of the liberation of his people. So when you see a guy like that start using Black Panther funds to live luxuriously, it makes you raise your eyebrows. On top of that, Huey is legitimately famous at this point. He's hanging around rich, famous friends, and he has honest-to-God fans. Huey is starting to look less like a freedom fighter and more like a movie star.
Some people have a distorted view of me, and it gives me very much trouble. It adds to the sort of timid personality that I already have. It makes me uncomfortable because I know that I can't give them all of those things that their idol is supposed to. And I don't want to appear to them a fake, but I would just like to tell them that, I'm just another regular human being.
Huey is also beginning to behave in a very paranoid and erratic manner at this time, and there's rumors that he's using drugs as well. Just 6 months after Huey had got out of prison, the FBI sent an internal memo that said he was, quote, on the brink of mental collapse, end quote. But at this point, the internal conflicts of the Black Panthers are just that, internal. The rest of the world has no idea that the party isn't as unified as they're pretending to be. But all of that would quickly change in 1971.